Consider, in most major events, it's the little things that can make or break them. In 1986, the Challenger space shuttle was lost due to a cheap O-ring that probably cost less than a few dollars. Because of that, 7 lives and hundreds of millions of dollars were lost. Consider, it's often mentioned that a blood clot, sometimes so small that it takes a microscope to see it, can kill someone. Blood flow to a critical part of the brain is blocked and a life is lost due to a microscopic chunk of sticky cells. Consider, a small patch of black ice on an otherwise dry road can cause the car to go out of control and crash. The wheel twists, control is lost on a sharp curve, and death can result. The list goes on and on. Some small thing, often not even visible, can destroy a major undertaking. But consider, can we call a marriage a major undertaking? I do. I consider my marriage a major undertaking. I've been married for a little over 8 years to a beautiful woman named Avery. We have 2 wonderful boys, Mark and Kevin. Mark is my namesake. Mark Jr. Kevin is named after my father. We live in a nice home, one with room enough for a growing family. I'm not a college graduate, but I have a good job as a master mechanic. My talents and skills have made us a good living. I work long hours, but the money makes it worth it. I've always considered my marriage the high point of my life. I worked hard to provide for my family. I considered it a major undertaking, and I took it seriously. What broke my marriage was a small thing. In my case, it was a small blood vessel in my brain that was too close to another vessel, and sometimes, when conditions were just right, the vessel would swell and touch the other. The result was a migraine headache. I had one on that fateful day. Mine was classic in its symptoms. Light was painful, sounds were magnified, and smells were horrible. It came on me suddenly and without warning. Just a blinding pain that took me by surprise. I knew what it was immediately. The problem was that I didn't have my Imitrex inhaler with me, so I had no way to stop or mitigate the pain. The pills I carried weren't as effective as the inhaler, and it would take time to reduce the pain to a manageable level. Time I couldn't work anyway. I staggered in to see my boss and gave him the bad news. He was panicked at my distress and called his secretary in. Take him home. Hell, it's almost quitting time, so he doesn't have to worry about hours. Just punch him out and give me his card. And don't let him drive for God's sake. Go now. Hannah helped me stand up, and she and my boss led me carefully out the door and down the hall to the exit. Hannah led me outside, helped me lean back against the wall while she went for her car. I couldn't stand the light, so I kept my eyes closed and my hands to my temples, pressing as hard as I could to help block the pain. Once in the car, I leaned back against the seat and tried to block everything out. The pain was intense and getting worse. I was almost blind, the light causing me to squeeze my eyes tightly closed. The sounds were now just a deep booming in my head, and the smell was disgusting, causing my stomach to rumble. Since Hannah knew where I lived, I didn't have to say or do anything while she drove. It seemed to take forever, but eventually she stopped the car, went around and opened my door, then pulled me out. I went following where she led. It was all I could do. Hannah got me inside and helped me to the kitchen, where I told her to open the refrigerator and get the injector out. She found it, put it in my hand, and held me up while I placed it in my nose and pushed the plunger. I inhaled at the same time, taking the aerosol into my lungs and quickly into my bloodstream. I had her guide me into the family room off the kitchen and help me to lay down on the couch. I asked her to close all the blinds and turn off any lights. She did so, waited a few minutes until I told her that I felt the relief beginning already, and then she left. I thanked her for getting me home and welcomed the silence when she was gone. I must have fallen asleep quickly once the pain started to fade, because I woke up sometime later to voices. It was very dark in the room, so I knew it was later in the day. As I remembered where I was, I noticed immediately that the pain was gone. I felt like I had taken a beating around my neck and shoulders, but that was just the residue of the migraine. I sat there in the darkness, recognizing the voices of my wife, Avery, and her friend Olivia from next door. They didn't seem to know I was there since the lights were still out. Maybe Avery had let me sleep, thinking I might have come home early. But no, my car wasn't in the driveway. She probably didn't even suspect I was home. I considered surprising them both, but then started to pay attention to their conversation. "Come on, Avery, how was it? Was it as good as before? Give me the details, girl." "It was fantastic. I felt like I was in heaven. He was even better this time than he was before. God, it was almost mind-blowing. It was the best sex I've ever had." "Even better than Mark? Better than your husband?" "Hell yes. I love Mark to death, but he's never made me feel like that. Never. Of course, I never let him do those things to me either. But Edward must think you're a minx then." "Of course, but I'm his minx. And I love it. God, I can't wait until the next time." "Aren't you afraid of Mark finding out? What would he do? Have you thought about that? You're risking a lot, you know." "Mark will never find out. And even if he did, so what? He won't do anything about it. He's a sweetheart, and he would forgive me. He would never divorce me and take a chance on losing his kids. He loves those kids, and he knows I would take them away from him in a heartbeat. All I need would be a cutthroat lawyer, and he'd be toast." "This doesn't sound like you, Avery. I've never heard you talk that way about Mark. How could you say you love him when you talk that way? You scare me, girl. I think you're making a huge mistake. I really do. I love Mark. I really do. But I don't want to stop what I have with Edward either. I want both. I want the sex I get with Edward and the love I get with Mark. I need both, and I won't give it up." I had heard enough. My migraine was gone, but the pain in my heart was far worse. The hurt was so intense that my stomach tightened, and my breath came in gasps. A ringing filled my ears, and my blood pounded in my head. I clung to the doorframe, fearing I might have a heart attack, until I began to feel somewhat normal again. I still hadn't let them know I was there, but as my composure returned, fury grew inside me, escalating until I felt ready to explode. Straightening up and lifting my head, I stepped into the kitchen light. The moment Olivia spotted me, an abrupt silence fell over the room. She glanced up, and her eyes widened as her mouth formed a startled "oh." Her hand instinctively flew to her lips, and she whispered, "Oh my God." Avery, noticing Olivia's reaction, turned to see what had caught her attention and saw me standing there. Her expression shifted rapidly from contentment to surprise, then fear, and finally anger. In one swift motion, she pushed her chair back and stood up, facing me. "How much did you hear? Why in the hell were you lurking there and spying on me?" I remained silent, staring at her. My gaze then moved to Olivia, who quickly rose and said, "I have to go. Jason and I will keep the boys unless you come to get them. I'll call you later." She almost ran out through the side door, and I watched her leave without uttering a single word. Once Olivia was gone, I turned my attention back to Avery. This was the woman I had loved unconditionally for the past 8 years, the happiest years of my life. I had envisioned a future where we grow old together, but now those dreams were in ruins. Tonight, Avery had destroyed any chance of forever. "Where are the boys? What did you do with them while you were with your lover? Did you take care of them, or were you too caught up in your fun to bother?" My voice was now calm and cold, though I was still deeply wounded. The pain was sharp and would take a long time to dull. There would be countless days filled with unbearable agony. Avery's face twisted in anger, transforming her beauty into an ugly mask. Maybe this mask was the true Avery, the one I had never seen, but who had always been there, hidden from view. She snapped back, "The boys are with Lily. Olivia and I were out shopping, and Jason was babysitting for me. I wasn't with anyone else, just Olivia." With her explanation, she seemed to feel triumphant. The anger on her face shifted to a look of satisfaction. Then she realized I had been home all along and questioned, "What are you doing home? Where's your car? And why were you sitting there in the dark? Were you spying on me? Trying to catch me in something?" "I came home early with a severe migraine. Gary had Hannah drive me since I couldn't stand the light. I took my Imitrex and fell asleep. I've been here ever since." As I spoke, a tremor coursed through my stomach, and I felt the urgent need to vomit. Rising to head to the bathroom, I continued, "Your voices woke me, and what I heard made me sick. I need to use the bathroom, so if you'll excuse me." I rushed to the bathroom, trying unsuccessfully to empty my stomach, my body fighting to expel the turmoil within. I sat on the bathroom floor, pressing my face against the cool porcelain. Slowly, my body relented and my breathing normalized. Sweat dried on my face as the urge to vomit subsided. After a few more minutes, I splashed water on my face, rinsed my mouth, and gathered myself. Feeling slightly more in control, I returned to the kitchen where Avery sat, staring out the window. I'm going to get the boys. I'll put them to bed tonight. I walked past her and out the door, heading next door to the King's house. Jason and Olivia Kane were our neighbors and best friends. We often spent evenings on each other's decks, talking and sharing drinks. I wondered if Jason knew what had happened. I walked up their back steps, knocked once, and let myself in. Olivia was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in front of her, talking to her husband. She must have told him, as his face bore a look of pity. Olivia just appeared frightened. I came to get the boys. Are they ready to go home? Without waiting for a response, I moved past Jason to the family room, where I assumed the boys were playing with Lily, their teenage daughter. I found them working on a puzzle together, with Lily watching over them. She smiled as I entered the room and stood up. "Hi, Mr. Harris. Did you come to get them?" At my nod, she said, "I'll get their jackets." Seeing them play filled me with sadness. Scenes like this were the collateral damage of infidelity, I thought. All the simple, everyday joys of family life shattered by the inconceivable selfishness of one or both parents. Broken beyond repair in most cases. This felt like one of those instances. "Thanks, Lily. I'll be in the kitchen when they're ready." I walked back to the kitchen where Jason and Olivia remained seated. I looked at Olivia and then at Jason, hoping for some clarity or perhaps a flicker of understanding. "Did you both know? Did you know she was cheating on me? Did it give you some sort of sick thrill to keep that secret while we were together?" My anger churned out harsh words, but I needed answers. I wanted to know what my dear friends knew. Jason glanced at Olivia, their faces mirroring each other's anger, before he responded. "I didn't know anything, buddy. I swear if I had known, I would have told you immediately. I can't believe my wife kept this from me. That was really low. Damn low. You didn't deserve that. I won't apologize on her behalf, but I'm here if you need me." Jason's eyes remained fixed on Olivia, seething with betrayal. I believed him. He would have told me if he knew. It was clear now that it had been Olivia and Avery's secret. "Then I have you to thank, Olivia. Thank you for turning me into a joke, a cuckold, a wimpy husband who didn't need to know his wife was in another man's bed. Hope it makes you feel good, leaking those sordid details." I saw Lily from the corner of my eye and forced a smile as the boys came out, each holding a cookie. I prayed she hadn't overheard my last comments. Judging by her innocent expression, I believed she hadn't. I commented on the cookies as I ushered the boys out the door and headed home. I didn't look back. I'd make sure Olivia never saw my boys again. I'd find a way. We entered the house through the back door, and the boys ran upstairs to change for dinner. I passed through the empty kitchen into the family room where Avery sat, shrouded in darkness, just as I had been earlier. I turned on the lamp beside the couch and opened the curtains to let in the fading daylight. The room now filled with shadows, dark corners, symbolizing the hidden secrets my loving wife had kept. Avery looked dreadful. Her eyes were red and glazed with tears, her face pale and drawn, her shoulders hunched. All the anger and defiance had left her, replaced by a look of fear I would have pitied under different circumstances. But it was too late for pity. Instead, I felt disgust. Now she was contrite. Now she was frightened. I couldn't accept such a drastic change in just 10 minutes. No, this was the first move in her bid for control. This was the cheating wife who had concealed her betrayal, a face marked by deception and cunning, not regret. I looked at her and asked the first question that came to mind. Who is he? What does he have that I don't? She just stared at me, silent, and I was about to turn and leave when she finally spoke. Who he is isn't important, and has nothing to do with you. Mark, I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. I never meant for you to know. I never wanted to hurt you like this. I'm so sorry you heard what I said to Olivia. You have to understand. You have to. Funny. No, I'm sorry I did it. No, I wish it had never happened. No, It'll never happen again. Just sorry I got caught and you had to find out. I shook my head as I sank into the soft recliner she had bought me for our 5th anniversary. I used to love it, but now it was just a chair. Please, you have to let me explain this to you. It doesn't have to be the end of us. We can go on just as before. We can if you'll just try to understand. Will you? She looked at me with a pleading expression, one I had seen before when she wanted something I disagreed with. Can you tell me it's over? Can you promise me you'll never see him again or be with him again? Is it done? I kept my voice steady, my body rigid, my hands gripping the arms of the chair to maintain control. Avery looked at me, her eyes wide and tears beginning to stream down her cheeks. She didn't answer. That was enough for me. She wouldn't stop. I heard her words to Olivia. She wanted both, and she wasn't going to let me stand in her way. She wasn't going to give him up. She wanted me to accept it. I guess that's your answer. I'll put the boys to bed after dinner, and then we can discuss our options. I'll move my things out of the house tomorrow. I guess I'll stay with my brother at his place. I rose and walked out of the room into the kitchen. Funny how the kitchen becomes the default place when things get really bad. Why is that? Strange thought to have when your world is falling apart. Stranger still to know that your world is falling apart. Avery went about fixing dinner while I took the boys down to the playroom, spending the next hour or so just enjoying their company. We were in the middle of a game when Avery called us for dinner. We headed upstairs noisily, and I directed the boys to the bathroom to wash their hands. Routine things, holding it together for their sakes. Dinner that night was tense. The boys were their usual lively selves, chattering away and leaving their plates half empty, savoring the carefree simplicity of their world. In stark contrast, their parents sat in silence, lost in their own thoughts, contemplating the gravity of impending decisions. Ah, the innocence of childhood. Why are children so eager to grow up? They see the freedom adults appear to have and misunderstand it as boundless. They see our decisions without recognizing the heavy consequences. They equate independence with a lack of rules. Adults know better. Then again, some don't. Some, like Avery, see freedom as without bounds, dismissing rules and consequences alike. After dinner, Avery cleaned up while I took the boys upstairs to bed. We talked, read a couple of stories, and spent an hour just enjoying each other's company until they finally surrendered to sleep. I lingered at their door, dimming the light and watching as they pulled the covers up to their necks, prepared to drift into a dreamland full of endless possibilities and new discoveries. My eyes burned and my throat tightened with grief, knowing that this too would inevitably end. Downstairs, I sank into my chair, searching desperately for something to anchor me, but everything felt as if it were slipping away beyond my grasp. I had loved Avery with all my heart, but I couldn't erase the memory of those fateful words I overheard in the dark. He's never made me feel like that. No, there was no return from that. I felt the love inside me die as I struggled to consider the future. Avery walked in and sat down. We have to talk. I know you're upset, but you have to understand. What I have with Edward is just the excitement of something new. I know it will pass quickly, but right now, I can't stop seeing him. It's something that has a hold on me, and I can't give it up. But it hasn't affected how I feel about you. I love you, not him. He's just a distraction, nothing more. It will end soon, and we can get back to how we were. You just have to let this happen. Her words flowed, but I struggled to comprehend. I can't give it up. I can't stop seeing him. You have to let this happen. Was she delusional or just out of touch with reality? Whatever the case, this was going to stop. Now. I'm sorry, but you're the one who doesn't understand. There is no us. There is no we. There is only you and him. That's all there is now. You and I are done. Finished. Over. There is no discussion, and I could never understand. You should know that after being married to me for the past 8 years, you couldn't possibly think I would accept your affair. But Mark, I love you. I do. You're the only man I've ever loved. I don't love Edward. I don't. Please try to understand. Give me this time. Please, for our marriage and our family, just give me this time. Take all the time you want. I'll be contacting an attorney tomorrow. We'll divide everything evenly. I have no desire to hurt you as you've hurt me. I just wanted over. I was emotionally spent, and all I wanted was to retreat to bed and forget, even if only for a few hours. My headache had faded, but the pain in my heart was all too real. I longed for oblivion, but I was unprepared for what came next. Damn you then, no divorce. I'll fight you every step of the way, and I'll take everything you have. I'll make sure you don't get custody of the boys, and I'll restrict your visitation rights as much as possible. If you won't let me have this time for myself, it's going to cost you everything, and I'll still have Edward. You can't stop me, and you know it. As her barrage continued, it became clear that this marriage had been over for some time. This level of anger and disrespect wasn't spontaneous. It was calculated and deliberate. She had never cared about hurting me. If she had, she would have ended it before it began. Instead, she anticipated my discovery and chose to inflict maximum pain rather than end her affair. There was no love here, only greed and a desire to humiliate me. I watched her, feeling my anger swell. The expression on my face must have conveyed that she had crossed a line as her venomous satisfaction shifted to fear. My words came out like a whip. I have only one thing to say to you, Avery. When you corner a rat, it'll turn on you. It'll fight to the death when there's no way out. You should have thought of that before you backed me into a corner. Now you'll pay the price. Please, Mark. I don't want to do this, but I feel like I have no choice. I love you, and I'll do anything to stop you from leaving. If you can't understand and accept that, I'll fight you. You'll have no choice but to give up and stay with me. I know you. You love me and the boys too much to leave. I know you, Mark. You'll stay. Goodbye, Avery. Tell the boys I'll see them when I can. I'll just grab a few things and then I'll be out of here. We can arrange for me to pick up the rest later. I headed upstairs and quickly packed a bag with essentials, bathroom items, a few pairs of underwear, some jeans, and socks. Everything I needed for a couple of days. 8 years of marriage, and I was leaving with nothing but bitter memories. But my 2 wonderful sons, that's all that mattered to me now. When I came back downstairs, Avery was sitting in the kitchen by the door, clearly ready to make one last plea. Mark, please don't do this. I'm begging you, don't. Tell me you're done with him. Promise you'll never see him again. Just tell me that, and maybe we have a chance. I can't. I just can't. Please. I shoved her aside, resisting the urge to slap her, knowing the anger brewing inside me needed more control. I'll stop by in the evenings after work so the boys won't notice anything right away. I opened the door and left, the door slamming behind me as I tossed my bag into the back of my truck. I backed out of the garage and drove away. On the road, I pulled out my cell and called my brother, Jacob. He lived about 10 miles away in a small subdivision. Jacob lived alone ever since his wife ran off with a friend of his 2 years ago. He didn't know where she was, and he didn't care anymore. They hadn't divorced, but Jacob didn't let that stop him. He had become a regular drinker, spending most nights out with the guys. We had argued about it, but Jacob wouldn't budge. While he was rarely drunk, he often stayed buzzed. I figure he was burying his own memories, but that was just my opinion. He answered, and when I asked for a place to stay, he told me to make myself at home. He'd be back sometime later, not to worry. So I drove to his place, found the key under the planter on the porch, and let myself in. As usual, the house looked like no one lived there. Jacob was many things, but not a slob. In fact, he was compulsively neat. He had always been that way, and it was comforting to see some things hadn't changed. It was just my life that was a mess. I checked the fridge, found a few beers, and made myself comfortable as he suggested. By the time he got back, I was pleasantly buzzed. I had made a trip to the store for more beer, and had already consumed half of them. When Jacob got home, I told him about the fight with Avery. All he said was, well, shit, bro. That pretty much summed it up. To help out, he sat down and started drinking the remaining beer, making sure I didn't go too far off the deep end. I'm your brother, he said. Always here for you. The next morning, I woke up with a serious hangover and a pounding headache. It was my fault for drinking like that. Despite having a reason, it was no excuse. I staggered to the bathroom and stood under the shower, letting the cold water wash away the remaining alcohol in my system. Staying drunk wouldn't solve anything. I found the note from Jacob saying he was at work and had reported me off for the day. Not surprising, since we were scheduled to work that Saturday. We both worked at the same company, leasing and renting heavy construction equipment for major contractors throughout the state. With customers depending on us, it was our job as top mechanics to keep the rigs running, no matter the problem. The work was demanding, but it paid well and allowed me to provide for my family. That was my role, to provide. So I knew I had to keep working, making the money Avery used to maintain the house she was so proud of. I believe she saw it as a home for us, a symbol of security for our family. It was something I took pride in, my way of honoring and cherishing my family. But last night, Avery shattered that illusion. She viewed the house differently, as an asset to leverage in a divorce, ensuring her security while buying beautiful clothes and lingerie for her lover. I increased the flow of water, trying to drown out those thoughts. Even though I was late, I had to get to work, where I could think, plan, and decide. Things I couldn't do now with emotions running high. It was clear from last night that Avery had planned this betrayal in advance, knowing I'd be reeling from the shock. She had devised a divorce strategy to take everything, making it about hurting the kids and portraying me as the villain if I didn't accept her affair. She had stacked the deck against me, confident she wouldn't lose her comfortable life to a jealous husband. I dressed and grabbed a box of extra-large trash bags. I knew she would be gone this morning, taking the boys to her mother's place for a birthday party. It was the boys' 5th birthday. I drove over to the house and let myself in. I emptied my closet and drawers, stuffing everything into multiple big garbage bags. Then I grabbed my bathroom essentials, packed them into a small overnight bag, and took everything out to my truck. I heaved the bags into the back before heading back inside. I wasn't leaving just yet. After work, I'd come back to spend time with the kids. I had a lot to ponder and decisions to make. One thing was clear: my marriage was over. I would never touch Avery again. She would no longer be my wife, my lover, or my confidant. She was someone else's lover now, not mine. The thought of that brought tears, and I sat on the floor of what used to be our bedroom and cried. Loss is hard. At work, I dove straight into the job, working through breaks and lunch hour. I welcomed the distraction, burying thoughts of home, wife, and kids under fuel injectors, drive chains, and fuel pumps. I tackled broken drive gears and hydraulic lifts, anything challenging. I worked on the toughest tasks without a word. I was like a man possessed and kept at it for 10 hours until Jacob tapped me on the shoulder for a break. "Hey man, come on. Jesus, take a break, would you? You're making the rest of us look lazy." He stood there waiting until I stopped, a dazed look on my face. "Sorry man, just trying to lose myself and work. Didn't mean to shame anyone." "Sorry." I must have looked like I was about to break down when Jacob took me by the elbow and led me to the break area. Jacob and I had been tight since our parents died in a car accident 10 years ago. He was my best man 8 years ago and is the godfather to my boys, Mark Jr. and Charlie. I sat down and stared at the table as Jacob got us both a cup of hot coffee. It wasn't good coffee, but it was hot. "Oak, talk to me. Tell me the whole story and don't leave anything out." "Start talking." I started talking and didn't stop for 10 minutes. I told Jacob everything: the shame, the humiliation, the contempt Avery showed me, and even the threats she used to keep me from ruining her plans. She was trying to make it impossible for me to stop her or get back at her without losing everything. She seemed to relish in making me accept her actions. I told Jacob about the look on her face as she humiliated me, as she boasted to Olivia about how wonderful it was. The contempt when she threatened to take everything from me was unbearable. Her lover was clearly more important to her than our marriage. Jacob was shocked. He had always thought of Avery as a good woman and a good mother. Mark had never hinted at any problems, and Jacob assumed their marriage was strong. But now, seeing his brother's pain, he felt a deep hurt. Mark was a good man, a solid father, and a dependable provider. The guys at the garage knew they could always count on him. He had helped many over the years. Jacob's shock turned to anger. How could she do this to Mark? What was wrong with her? His anger grew as he looked at his broken, beaten brother and best friend. Mark, listen to me. You're not going to take this, are you? You have to do something. Let me and the guys help you. This can't stand. Jacob's homely face was etched with concern. I looked up with a hopeless expression. What can I do? She'll take everything if I divorce her. Child support, alimony, the house, the car, everything. You know I would never take anything away from my kids. She's using them as a weapon against me. She knows I won't hurt them, and probably so does that prick she's with. They've got me by the balls, and Avery's doing the squeezing. Jacob shook his head and growled, "Damn them both. You know I loved Avery like my own sister, but now she's made her bed and will have to lie in her own shit. We have to go after them both. The first thing we need to do is find out who he is. That's the easy part. Let me make a couple of calls, then we can talk." I just shrugged. "Oak, but I don't know what you think I can do. She won't tell me anything about him." "So what? We will find him, and he'll go down like anyone else. And you know you can't go back to Avery, right? What she did makes that impossible. If you accept it, she'll castrate you emotionally. She'll lose all respect for you, man." I was momentarily taken aback, but a small smile crept onto my face. "You're right. She's no longer my loving wife. Last night, I learned how quickly love can morph into hate. And today, my hate for her is stronger than my love was yesterday. She twisted my feelings, and now that bitterness will come back to haunt her. I told her that, you know." We talked a little longer, clocked out without any overtime, and headed to a small bar near work. Neither of us intended to get drunk. This was business, and plans had to be made. Jacob called in a few others, and we sat around a table, plotting. I was astounded by the support I received from my friends. They didn't ask questions. They just wanted to know how they could help. This was the loyalty I'd once thought I had from Avery, but that was an illusion. Together, we crafted a workable plan. At 7 o'clock that evening, I pulled into the driveway and went into the house. Funny, I thought, as I walked in, it was no longer a home, just a house. I walked into the kitchen, took off my jacket, and moved to the family room. There I saw Avery sitting in her chair, watching our 5-year-old twins, Mark and Charlie, playing a video game. I stood there, locking this image in my mind forever. It wasn't going to be this way any longer. Avery was looking at me as I watched the kids. She had a small smile on her face, a smile I now comprehended. It was a smile of contempt for me and for this once wholesome scene. It was all a lie, a huge lie, with her as the liar. Now I could see it clearly. I returned her gaze, but not the smile. When I turned away, she looked down. I walked out to the kitchen, rummaged through the refrigerator, and found some leftover fried chicken and mashed potatoes. I put them in the microwave to reheat. I wasn't hungry, but I needed to be doing something. I had planned to talk to the boys just before bed, but Jacob had convinced me to delay it. When I did speak to them, it would be the first step in the battle against Avery. I might lose, no doubt, but I would go down fighting. I sat down with my plate and began to eat slowly. The food lacked flavor, but I needed to maintain my strength for what lay ahead. Halfway through my meal, Avery walked in and sat across from me. I glanced at her briefly before resuming my methodical chewing, saying nothing. I had no words for her yet. "Have you calmed down from last night? Can we talk like civilized adults now?" she asked. Civilized adults. I thought to myself. I chose to stay silent. "Aren't you going to speak to me? Are you really going to be childish and give me the silent treatment? I expected better from you, Mark. We have to think about the children now. Remember your place as their father." Am I really their father? Makes me wonder now. Maybe I should verify that with some tests. My voice was calm, devoid of anger, just a simple statement. Avery's face clouded with anger, and she was about to retort when I cut her off. "Careful, Avery. The children will hear you if you start to yell. Remember the children? The ones you accused me of forgetting about when I got angry last night. Now it's your turn to think carefully about what you've done to their world." She stopped and lowered her voice, hissing, "It seems you haven't thought much about what I said last night. I expect you to get over this and get back to normal. Nothing has to change at home. I still love you, and you are my husband. That hasn't changed. The children and you won't be deprived of anything." I keep my activities private, only when they are in school and not around. You won't lose anything since I'm always here for you. I continued eating, my face expressionless. My eyes, blank and unresponsive, conveyed more than words ever could. Avery began to sense this, and for the first time, I saw a shiver of fear pass through her. What are you going to do? Are you going to make this difficult for me? I hoped that you loved me enough to let me have this time for myself. I told you last night he hasn't taken anything from you, and that I would always be here for you. Why can't you understand that? She was becoming emotional, while I simply stared at her, slowly chewing my food. Finally, I swallowed and said, I think we should wait for this discussion until the children are in bed. I listened to you last night while you said your piece. I didn't like it, but I listened. Afterwards, I behaved badly, and I apologize for that. I should have stayed. I'm sorry for leaving that way, but I will not have this discussion while the children are still up. Avery seemed mollified by that and began to smile again. Thank you for that. I accept your apology. I think you were justified in some of what you said, but you hurt me with your words. I'll take the boys up soon, and then we can talk. She walked past me, placing a hand on my shoulder. I flinched at her touch, and she quickly withdrew her hand. The revulsion I felt from that simple touch was uncontrollable. I went to be with the kids and tried to act normally. It was difficult, knowing everything was about to change. I accepted that Avery's actions had destroyed all of this for me. Maybe I should just be a good cuckold and accept her terms, wait it out until she was done with the other man. After all, didn't she say she still loved me and wanted to stay married to me? But I knew I couldn't do that. Not now, not ever again. It was after 9 o'clock when Avery came into the family room where I was sitting. She heaved a sigh, lowered herself into her chair, and smiled. Got them down and asleep. They are getting almost too big to put to bed now. They say they go to sleep, but I know they turn the light on after I leave to read. They're good boys. I looked at her and nodded. They're good kids. It's too bad this is going to be so hard on them. But I don't know how to spare them the pain they are going to go through. What do you mean? I thought you understood that there is no need to do anything. Just let me have this time for myself, and then we can go back to being a family like we were. Just be patient. I told you it will be over soon. You will have lost nothing. I love you so much, and I want to remain as your wife. This is just something that I have to do, nothing more. I looked at this woman who had been my wife for the past 8 years. I married her because I couldn't imagine my life without her. We had 2 great kids and a good marriage until last night. Now everything had changed, and she couldn't understand why it had to. Tonight, I wouldn't delve into everything, but I needed to set the record straight. Avery, I listened to you last night. You made your case. You said you love me and want to be my wife. You say he is taking nothing from me. You won't tell me who he is because you say it is none of my business. And you told me what would happen if I tried to divorce you. You made it very clear that you would take everything from me without remorse. You threatened to take everything from me, including my boys. You were very clear on that. Avery was listening, but a look of anger clouded her face. She wasn't pleased with my summation of her words, however accurate they were. It sounded stark coming from me, but she couldn't deny the truth in what I said. I don't believe you see it the same way I do, Mark. I told you it's completely separate from our marriage, but you wouldn't listen. Why can't you believe me when I say I still love you and want our marriage to continue? What I heard from you last night, Avery, was contempt. Contempt for me and for our marriage. When I got angry, you responded with threats. Threats you had clearly thought through before you spoke to me. You humiliated me, denigrated me, and blamed me for not understanding. You knew exactly how I would react, which is why you had everything planned out. Why did you think you had all the answers ready to lay out for me? I could feel my anger rising. Until now, I had been calm and controlled, but it was slipping away. Avery's angry face only fueled my resolve. I concluded, one thing you forgot last night when you made your threats and pushed me into a corner you thought I couldn't escape. I told you then, and I'll remind you now. Even a rat will fight the cat when he's backed into a corner and has nothing to lose. With that, I rose and began to walk away. When I reached the kitchen door, I paused. I'll be staying somewhere else at night for a while. I'll come home after work so the children don't notice anything immediately. What do you mean you're staying somewhere else? Why aren't you staying here? We can't work this out if you're gone. Mark, don't do this. I really do love you, and I don't want to lose you. I don't know what I'll do if you leave me. Please, Mark, let's try to work this out. There has to be some way. I'm sorry, Avery. The one thing I know right now is that I no longer love you. Your infidelity killed any love I had for you last night. That's the only thing I know for sure. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but there is no going back. Mark, what about your vows to love and cherish me? Can you walk away from that? Can you? I also remember your promises to me. You promised on our wedding day to forsake all others, but you didn't. You promised to love only me, but you gave what we shared to him. I provided for you, loved you, honored our marriage vows, and gave you all I had. It wasn't enough. You gave what was mine to someone else. You gave it away and destroyed my love in the process. So yes, I can walk away from that. You destroyed it and left it in tatters. I can walk away, and I will, just not yet. I left and drove to Jacob's place. He agreed to let me stay there as long as I wished. I needed some time to finish what we had started. Soon it would be over and I would begin my new life. For the next few days, I worked and spent time in the evening with my kids, but said nothing more to Avery. She tried several times to talk to me, but each time I walked away. On one occasion, she screamed at me, but I simply grabbed my keys and left without a word. At work during the break, one of the gang came in to tell Jacob that things were in place, and they should have something within a few days. All we had to do now was wait, just be patient. Nothing changed until the following week. I came home each night to an increasingly nervous Avery. The kids hadn't seemed to notice anything different, but Charlie did ask if I was working a lot more. When I asked him what he meant, he said he only saw his daddy for a short time in the evening. I assured him we would do something that weekend. Charlie seemed to accept that, and the small crisis passed. Avery continued to ask me questions, but now I simply ignored her and left as soon as she took the kids upstairs to put them to bed. When she came down, I was gone. By the end of the week, Jacob walked into the break room and sat down, handing me a folder. I looked at him questioningly, but he simply shook his head. Opening the folder, I found a brief report, just 2 sheets of paper, each headlined with the name Edward Hall. Edward was a junior attorney at Lincoln, Rice & Holmes. At 24, he was nearly a decade younger than me, recently divorced, and living in a condo. Avery had visited his place twice this week, spending over an hour each time. Now I had a name and an address. I knew who he was and a bit about him. What I didn't understand was what Avery saw in him that made her throw away our marriage. What did he have that was worth sacrificing everything we built together? But that wasn't my problem anymore. If Avery had come to me earlier and confessed, maybe things would have been different. But she presented it as a fact I was just supposed to accept. Okay, now what? What do I have to do to set this in motion? I asked Jacob, seeking his guidance. Despite my being the one with the problem, Jacob seemed to be in charge. I was fortunate to have friends and a brother like him, especially now. It's already in motion. The first lesson is due tonight. I'll call you at home when it's done. Just make sure you have your cell with you. Once I call, you can let her know and end this. Okay. Knowing things were set didn't bring any satisfaction. This wasn't the way I wanted to handle it, but Avery and her lover had forced me into a corner, and this was the only way I knew how to fight back. I wasn't a lawyer or a doctor capable of devising some sophisticated plan. I was a mechanic, a man who worked hard with his hands and took pride in providing for his family through honest labor. I had loved Avery with all my heart, but she wasn't satisfied with that. So be it. My plan was straightforward and fit my world, and she would see that very soon. I went home as usual and sat with my family at dinner, pretending everything was fine. Avery chatted with the kids, and I responded politely, even initiating some discussions. Inside, I was nervous but resigned. After dinner, I played video games with the kids and helped with their homework, assuming my typical role as husband and father. Avery finished the dishes and joined us, seeming more relaxed since I appeared to be like my old self. She likely thought everything would be okay again. As Mark immersed himself in video games with his boys across town, Edward Hall was wrapping up his evening at the office and heading to his car. His mind drifted to his recent rendezvous with Avery. She had been particularly passionate during their last encounter. When he asked her why, she revealed that her husband had found out about their affair. Edward had been shocked, but Avery assured him not to worry. It seemed strange to him, but he brushed it off. While heading to his car, he was suddenly shoved into a nearby alley. As he stumbled, trying to keep his footing, someone grabbed his arms, dragging him deeper into the alley toward a secluded courtyard. Two men pinned him against a wall, one on each side. Both wore black ski masks, their size intimidating Edward. Panic set in. He had nothing valuable on him. No expensive watch, no money. What could they possibly want? A third man, also masked and gloved, approached and lifted Edward's chin with a massive hand. In a deep voice, he asked, "Do you know a woman named Avery Harris?" Edward felt a cold chill. Oh God. Could this be her husband? She never mentioned he was this big. Panic flooded his system. "No, I don't know anyone by that name," he lied, shaking. The man punched him in the ribs, the pain intense and breathtaking. He saw stars and barely managed to stay conscious. "I'll ask you again. Do you know a woman named Avery Harris?" the man repeated. Edward realized lying wouldn't save him. "Yes, I know her," he admitted, praying he'd get out of there alive. "You will never see her or talk to her again. Do you understand me?" The man's grip tightened. "I hear you," Edward replied, hoping it was just a warning. But the man wasn't convinced. "We're going to make sure you understand. A man who sleeps with other men's wives is rarely smart." The two men lifted him away from the wall. The first blow hit his solar plexus, folding him in half. He wasn't allowed to fall. A second punch landed on his ribs, followed by a devastating blow to his jaw. The pain was unbearable, pushing him to the brink of unconsciousness. The beating continued relentlessly until he finally blacked out. When he came to, they slapped him awake, repeatedly drilling their warning into his head. Edward couldn't remember much after that, just snippets until he woke up in the emergency room at Memorial Hospital. Edward's injuries weren't life-threatening, but he was admitted to general care at the hospital. Heavily sedated and in some pain, he was nonetheless thankful that his injuries weren't severe. The men who attacked him had been clear about what he had to say when she called, and he repeated the message in his mind to ensure he wouldn't forget a word. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harris. It was my mistake, and I regret it. I'll never see you or speak to you again. I'll have no contact with you or your children. I'm sorry I ever met you. Goodbye." Edward lay back on the hospital bed, waiting for Avery's call, the threat of further repercussions hanging over him if he deviated from the script. He resolved never to get involved with a married woman again, no matter the circumstances. Meanwhile, my cell phone rang just after 8:00 p.m. as I played with the twins. Seeing Jacob's name on the caller ID, I excused myself to take the call in another room. Flipping it open, I listened to the terse message. "It's done. Lesson 1 delivered. He's been admitted at Memorial." The line went dead. I shut the phone and returned to the family room with a satisfied smile. Avery noticed but didn't comment, merely returning my smile, likely thinking it was good news. Later, Avery took the kids upstairs and gave me a questioning look before she left. "I'll be here when you come back down," I assured her. She smiled broadly and went to put the children to bed. I settled into the family room, relaxing in my chair. It was time for payback to begin. Avery returned carrying a pot of coffee and 2 cups. I thought we could talk some more. "You seem more resigned to things, and that makes me so glad. I was afraid of losing you, and that would have broken my heart. I know you might not believe me, but I love you. I can't lose you over something so trivial compared to what we have. You have to know that." As she spoke, I watched her closely. She was still as beautiful as ever, the woman I had loved for so long. I had envisioned growing old with her. Those plans and dreams now felt like ashes. It was time for the end to begin. "Avery, I need to tell you something, and I want you to listen very carefully. I know your lover is Edward Hall, a junior lawyer for Lincoln, Rice, and Holmes. I know all about him, and I know you've seen him even twice more this week." Avery's eyes widened in surprise, and it looked like she wanted to say something, but I motioned for her to stay silent. "Listen to me," I began. "You threatened me with divorce. When I expressed my anger, you threatened to take away everything I owned. Your exact words were burned into my memory. I will take everything you have." There were more words full of contempt that destroyed our marriage. "You backed me into a corner with no options, expecting me to stand by silently while you betrayed me. I warned you that cornered rats fight back." At this, I saw fear and pain flash across her face. She had no idea what was coming, but she sensed it wouldn't be pleasant. Her shoulders stiffened, and she instinctively bowed her head. "I know you told Olivia that I never made you feel the way he did. It ends now, and I'm sorry you enjoyed it so much, but Mr. Hall has been made aware that his time with you is over. He will never see you again. Never. He has also been informed that he is never to speak to my sons. He has agreed." Shock and disbelief contorted her expression as I continued. "I will file for divorce, but there will be no alimony. I'm filing on grounds of infidelity. Even though we live in a no-fault state, I can still file with reason. I have the evidence I need to prove your guilt. There will be child support. My sons will not lack anything. As long as you take care of them, I will ensure you have the means. However, you'll need to work for anything else you want personally. I'll handle everything, so you won't need to worry. I'll even cover the cost of the divorce." Avery stood up, her face flushed with anger. "You're insane if you think I'll agree to that. And I will take you to the cleaners just as I warned. Just wait." Despite her fear, she was defiant, attempting to bluff her way through the situation. "Why don't you give Mr. Hall a call right now? See what he has to say. Oh, wait, you'll need to call Memorial Hospital. The call I received earlier informed me that he's in the emergency room there. He might have been admitted by now. Just call his cell, you can use mine. I already have the number saved for you." Avery looked at me in horror. "What have you done? What did you do to Edward?" "Oh my God, Mark, what did you do?" "Why, Avery, whatever do you mean? I've been here at home with you all evening, and I was at work earlier, so how could I have done anything to anyone? What reason would I have to do anything to your lover? You made it clear that I was to stay out of it, that it was none of my concern." The look on my face must have frightened Avery. She had never seen me like this before. I had always been a calm, mild-mannered man who never hurt anyone, never even able to physically discipline the children, leaving that to her. But now she saw a different side of me. My face was cold and hard, my eyes devoid of emotion. Avery walked into the next room, and I heard her speaking on the phone. She must have reached someone because she returned with tears in her eyes, slumping into the chair, staring off into space. I calmly sat down and picked up the newspaper. I knew what she had heard on the phone. Her lover was in the process of breaking things off. It was either that or face a beating every time he saw her. That was a promise made to him by 3 very big men who had picked him up as he left work today. They explained exactly why he was being hassled and what would happen if he ever saw or spoke to Avery again. The demonstration had landed him in the emergency room. Avery wiped her tears, sighed deeply, and looked at me. "Well, it seems you win. Edward told me he could never see me again. He said he would have all my things sent back to me and that he never wanted to speak to me again. Well, it looks like you have nothing to worry about then. Everything is taken care of. I have my own lawyers, so they'll handle everything. This should be over very quickly." I set the paper down and stood up to leave. I'll talk to the boys this weekend and explain why we're getting divorced. Maybe they're old enough to understand. If not, they'll grow up and remember. As I walked away, I glanced back to see a very defeated Avery crying. "If I recall your words correctly, Avery, you said your affair was something that would pass quickly, and then things could go back to the way they were." I let out a bitter, angry laugh. "You're still young and beautiful, Avery. Maybe you'll find someone who can put up with your fantasies, someone who wants an open marriage, someone who lets you sleep with as many men as you want. I couldn't, but that's just me. Good luck." Kids may not understand it now, but we do. Adults have to live with the consequences of their actions. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you liked it, please like it and subscribe to the channel. See you soon.